Hi, once again, everybody. Welcome back to the Comstock channel. I'm Marlin Bowling with you. Thanks for joining us. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to it. That way we'll let you know whenever we post a new update, and share this video with others too, so we can help spread the word. The channel continues to grow, and we appreciate your help in that regard. Well, I want to turn to Clay Patton. Now, he works with Marshall Land Brokers and Auctioneers. He is based out of Lexington, Nebraska. And Clay, good to visit with you again. I haven't had a chance to visit with you for quite some time, but I know you've been busy in your new position. Lots of folks in the High Plains region know you in Kansas, Nebraska, Colorado, and that whole area. You've been doing a lot of things, but now here recently, I've noted that you've been able to sell some parcels of land. And some of it is farmland, some of it is rangeland, ranch land. And I just wanted to talk with you about what the recent trends are out there and how things are holding up, because I know you're kind of coming out of about a 4-year drought out there. So what's the latest from your perspective there?
Yeah, we're coming off of some strong commodity years when it comes to row crop prices, your corn, soybeans, wheat. And that has had a little impact here to the land market, but I would still say overall the land market here in central Nebraska continues to be very, very strong as we look across. We've seen some very aggressive land sales and auctions out here through the early part of 2024 as we continue on, and we're starting to get into planting season. I'll tell you, of course, the insurance dates are behind us now, and the temperature soil is really holding out. We're seeing a lot of tractors and planters rolling across Kansas and Nebraska, and they started pretty heavily over the weekend. We caught some moisture late last week. That kind of helped to really kind of gin some things up, but guys are back in the field and going. So the land market may hit a little bit of a pause button. A lot of leases are signed. Guys are ready to go, but there's still a lot of parcels out here on the market, and folks are still thinking about optimizing it. As you talked about, we sell a variety of different parcels, both including farmland as well as recreational and more pasture type land. And so we've actually seen quite a bit there. We just closed on 3 properties last week in Franklin County, Nebraska, that primarily consisted of both farm ground as well as some pasture type land and a little bit of recreational ground. So we continue to see a very strong market. Prices have stabilized quite a bit here at the current rate, where we're not quite seeing them climb like we may have saw there in 2022 into 2023, but the market still hasn't really fallen off either, coming from that perspective.
Isn't that kind of surprising, though, considering the tough times that we have gone through in that region? And it's been quite a while now. I'm amazed that people are still bidding up the way they are, especially when you look at the national economy, and things kind of seem like they're on the ropes if you look at the economy overall.
You know, it's really interesting that you bring that up. We just saw the CPI, or Consumer Price Index, data out here just a few weeks ago. And inflation, I think, is still in the back of a lot of investor mindsets. And when you look to the Federal Reserve, you look at M1 money supply, you know there's a lot of physical cash sales sitting out here in this U.S. economy. And investors, I think, both whether you want to talk about ag side or institutional investors, are looking for that hedge against inflation. And that's where this land market continues to be a very integral part of any investor's portfolio. And that's where we're seeing, really at this time, a really nice blend of both production agriculture as well as still some institutional money that's wanting to come back into this market. Right now, we're seeing some of those prime tracts of land come up, and I kind of call it the "we didn't buy it last time" syndrome, but there's been some very competitive bidding on the tracts of land where it was something that maybe it was for sale 10 years ago, 15, 20 plus years ago. The family wasn't able to purchase it this time, and this time around, they're a little bit more capitalized. They're coming off some strong years. They've been able to hold their cash together as well. They've been able to maybe pay down the bigger debt picture on their farm, and they're ready for that expansion. So that's where we see some of that ag land really returning back into its local area producers, but still with cash rents holding out fairly strong, whether you want to talk about the pasture rent side or onto the row crop side. That still seems to be pretty steady going into this year, even with some of the poorer crop prices. I don't know if guys were able maybe to lock in more inputs early. They were able to get some better hedges on out there, but the 2024 growing season really seems to be pretty stable that way. So institutionally speaking, those 2.5% to 3.5% returns seem to be attainable this year, and that seems to kind of hold the market in where it wants to sit right now.
You know, I always think of Marshall Land Brokers and Auctioneers as kind of a legacy company. I mean, they've
Yes,
been in
we're very much a
operation for
legacy
many
company.
decades out there. A lot of people know about them. And you guys cover a huge geographic area, but I just wondered if you've been able to tell, do you have certain areas that you cover that are maybe a little more stressed than other areas right now?
You're 100% right, Marlin. We are a legacy land company. We were started over two generations ago by Robin Marshall. Miles Marshall is our primary broker now, as Robin has moved on into retirement, but he's still very active in the land market himself. He manages several of his own farms, and he's always keen to help if it's a good friend or family member as well in marketing that piece of property. But Miles is our primary broker now, and he has the third generation, and Luke Huddleston joining him alongside as so we've got three generations working together there. So I definitely call us a legacy land company. In terms of we service all of Nebraska and Kansas, we've even at times worked into parts of South Dakota and Wyoming. So we do cover quite a geographic expanse. But, realistically, anytime we go in, we always try to get a good feel of what the market area is there. But when we list it, it seems that we've got aggressive. Whether you want to talk an auction format, we're getting a lot of people to the table that want to come in, they want to purchase land, whether that be locally, regionally, or even sometimes on a national picture, or if we have a traditional land listing in more of the private treaty market, we're still seeing a lot of good response there of people that are interested in buying land. And it's interesting. It's one of those situations where they call it a particular tract. We get to know that customer, and then we can help direct them to find the best piece of parcel of ground that's going to fit their needs, whether they're looking at farming, recreational, or other ag land uses. So, I wouldn't really say that there's truly an area that's maybe thinner or struggling, even as we're seeing, some drier conditions out in southwest Nebraska through northwest Kansas into south central Kansas, or areas where we're seeing the lower commodity prices. Things overall still seem to be pretty even, and there still seems to be plenty of demand when that land hits the market, albeit maybe it's just sitting a bit longer than it was, say, 12 to 18 months ago, but that's to be given the current state of the economy. But the land's still moving. It's not just sitting on the market.
So give us an idea if you're talking about some prime farmland in the Platte Valley, which is very productive, but it does need to be irrigated all the time. What is a good irrigated corn ground bringing these days compared to maybe what we hear about? We've all heard the stories in Iowa when you're talking like maybe 20,000 or something an acre. How about where you are, let's say around Lexington or Grand Island?
Yeah, so we're going to talk. So Grand Island would be Hall County. Out west where I'm at in Lexington, that would be Dawson County. That is prime and pristine Platte River Valley ground. And you're very right, Marlin. Irrigation is a key factor there. Governor Pillen here in Nebraska calls that the jewel of Nebraska. It's the Ogallala Aquifer, and Nebraska farmers and ranchers have done an extraordinarily great job in actually preserving that aquifer. So we're going to have it for generations to use. That's one thing. You go into other states, and when you purchase irrigated ground, guys are always a little leery, a little concerned. How long is the water? Well, here in Nebraska, the water looks very strong, and it's here to stay for a very long time because we're managing it and utilizing it properly. But you want to start throwing some numbers back to things. And of course, you can always go back to the county sales sheets, but we're going to be north of $10,000 an acre. Now, when you look at Hall County, primarily there around Grand Island, you've got some really key markets when it comes to seed corn country. You're going to see maybe a little bit more advantageous avenues for farmers to be able to go in and market their crop. So that's where we're going to start creeping up closer to maybe that $15,000 to $20,000 mark. All of it varies a little bit too in terms of being that individual tract of land, but I would say a safe range that you can estimate in that swath of I-80, let's call it, of about 75 miles from Lexington to Grand Island. Let's call it 10 to 20,000 per acre, just given some factors that may give one piece of parcel a little bit more inflection, one a little more disinflection, depending on the particular circumstance that you're in.
Now, with the recent spike in livestock prices, let's talk cattle here for a little bit. Everybody knows how sky high the cattle market has been for the last 2 or 3 years, something like that, especially after the ongoing drought affected the herd. Now, I would imagine that that has become of key interest to a lot of people that want to produce cattle now, and ranch land is probably a much hotter item than what it used to be. What do you think?
You're very right there, Marlin. Pasture is an extremely hot commodity right now as we look out through central Nebraska and Kansas. It's interesting the dynamic that's stepping up here too, and I think this is a great time to shout out at Marshall Land Brokers and Auctioneers. Jeff Marshall is one of our auctioneers as well as one of our land agents and equipment agents, and he himself is in the cattle industry and he's very key in marketing livestock here in the region. So this is something that we're really tuned and keyed into as well, just because we simply have people that are physically there in the market, they're into the cattle market day in and day out. But yes, we are getting to see some good quality pasture land come to market, and prices have increased significantly from where they're at. In the central Nebraska region here around Dawson County, we've seen on the lower end pasture around $2,000 an acre, but it's slowly crept up towards that 2,500 and beyond areas. You go into north central Kansas, and this is looking at some other auctions that have occurred in the region, but some prime parcels that guys were really keen to try and get a hold of. Again, that legacy aspect of something that may hadn't gone before. They've pushed it over $3,000 an acre in areas. So pasture is prime, but it's an interesting dynamic that's set up with it as well. I think part of the reason we're seeing more of this land come to market right now is that there's some older portions of the generation that are maybe taking advantage of the stronger cattle market. They're liquidating that cow herd, and rather than cash leasing or doing a production lease on the grass, they're just simply bringing the grass and the pasture itself to market as well. And so that's been key into helping get some of this back into the market, is seeing some of these older producers actually exit. Now, I know that really brings a concern. You look out to the latest cattle on feed report we saw, placement numbers were down fairly significantly. Does it show that heifer retention's finally started, or that the U.S. cow herd has just finally shrank to that point? I've seen folks argue it from both sides, but either way, it looks like maybe this is maybe an opportunity for some younger guys if they can find the right situation for them to get into one of these. But the price is still going to be pretty aggressive for them to actually try and go on outright and purchase it. But we are seeing more pasture come to market, so I think it's a positive aspect of it.
Okay, we covered the bookends. Now let's talk about what's in the middle. We covered the high-end irrigated corn ground, and we covered the rangeland, the pasture land out there. What about the dry land, cropland that you have available? My gosh, you're talking rangeland prices that were way above what, when I was farming, we used to get for just dry land, cropland. So how does that fit into the picture now in between those two?
It is really interesting. We are continuing to see the prime farmland continue to well outpace where pasture land is. But when you've got $1.80 plus fat cattle, it's really starting to get some guys thinking, do we kind of need to reset into where that pasture level needs to be? Now, obviously, it's a cyclical market, and everybody, I think, is all in the same mindset. We need to kind of make our hay while the sun shines here and take advantage of it. But in saying so, too, it shows that this market does have some elasticity, and there is some more topside to it, or could be some more topside to it, I should say. So does that give this pasture market some room to move as well? And it'll be interesting, Marlin, as you pointed out when we were having our row crop discussion as well. Is that something that guys are going to start, once we start cycling more through this $4.50 corn and things, is that going to bring this back to more reality when we start having to see cash lease renegotiations on current prices and that, especially if input markets stay kind of where they're at and continue to keep pressure on that bottom line for a lot of farmers? Is it a situation where we'll kind of see a reset coming up here? But right now, market continues to hold strong, whether you wanted to look kind of at all aspects, even dryland farm ground. While we don't see a ton of those sales here in our area of Nebraska, we do see a few more of those down in Kansas, and dryland farm ground still continues to move and still at some better prices. And I would still, in many often cases, say it's outpacing the pasture land, even in those instances, even though we're seeing some drier conditions there. So again, the message is the land market continues to hold strong. Obviously, the future is unknown to everybody. If we had a magic crystal ball, that would help us all out. But it's one of those, it's a legacy asset. It's something that you're going to buy. You're going to hold the portfolio for a long time. It's a great hedge against inflation. So it's something that still seems to be here, and it's still justifying the prices that it's bringing now.
Well, and you and I both know that anytime you're talking dry land, cropland in the plains region, it just has such wide extremes in potential. I mean, you can have a banner year where you have terrific crops, and you can just watch it all burn up too. So, I mean, you have to kind of shoot for that average out there when you're trying to price dryland, cropland. That's for sure. I'm very curious. There's a lot of interest nowadays in investor buying of farmland. Lots of that in the news now, whether you're talking Bill Gates or China or what have you. Has interest really picked up from people further away that are kind of not really connected locally? Can you tell if that has changed a lot?
That I think has a little bit tie into the interest rates and what the Federal Reserve does. We saw, of course, and what I'm going to call investor money, I'm going to call institutional money here as well. It's those that are going to have a direct tie to the land. They're looking more for an asset that they can that they can buy into. But land offers a lot of key features for some of these institutional money folks that are looking for it. They can buy larger blocks, and when larger blocks, in that excess of 10 million and up, so they can lock up a lot of capital into one asset class. And so it offers a lot of great potentials for them. But coming back to it, really kind of hammers back into where the interest rates are and where we've seen now institutional money. They go back to T-bills and bonds. They can even be a little more aggressive with some banking institutions, and they can start to achieve that 4+%, and even in some cases 5% type returns. That has definitely slowed down the influx of institutional money that's come back into the ag land market. But still, talking with investors, they like the aspect of land because it's something that they could hold for a long time. They like that legacy aspect of the land market. It's also something they know they may not best the market in terms of overall rate of return, but they feel fairly confident that they can continue to derive a stable rate of return coming back from them, something that they can kind of expect year in and year out as well. And so, even in some aspects of it too, I think there's still a little bit of that legacy feeling in the U.S., that American dream that you own land and it's a great asset to hold. But I would say overall, we are still seeing institutional money in the market. I don't think we're seeing it quite as aggressive as we were 2 years ago, say in 2022, or even in the latter part of 2021 when inflation really started to spike. That's when we started to really see that institutional money move.
So, from your perspective, do you think there seems to be more interest on the buyer's side or the seller side over here, or do you think they're pretty well balanced right now?
We are still seeing quite a bit of volume come to the market. So the thing when you look at 2021 and 2022, it was definitely more of a seller's market because we weren't seeing land come to market. Guys were wanting to hold on. There was a lot of still uncertainty coming out of the pandemic, what was happening. So when land would come up, we quickly get to see it move. It was something that's where we saw a lot of things where we would be pounding the sign in and somebody would drive by and we'd have a buyer's agreement written up by the end of the conversation. We are starting to see that slow down. So it's a little bit less of a seller's market now at this point. But I can't say that the buyers are completely in the driver's seat either. I kind of harken back to what you said. It's more of a balanced market that we've started to find ourselves in where, again, land is starting to sit a little bit longer. Maybe it's sitting closer to that 60, 75-day mark. I don't know if the average listing for us is sitting 100 days quite yet at this point. Because we, again, continue to see those right folks come along. And still, when we host auctions, whether that be a sole online auction, a simulcast auction with online and in-person bidding, or strictly an in-person bidding auction, we continue to see a lot of people that are coming to market. Some of those are cash buyers, some of those are finance buyers, but we're still seeing that be fairly aggressive to where auctions, folks aren't scared away to put land up to auction right now because the market still holds there. So I would call more of a balanced market where in some instances, maybe the seller has it if it's a prime parcel or prime piece that really can drive that demand. But in some instances too, if it's maybe a little less quality piece or it's maybe been there on the market, that gives it over into the buyer's hands. So I think you've got to call it more balanced with some instances of it both being more advantageous to the seller and to the buyer.
Yeah, with the modern age of technology the way it is, it's nice that you have the advantage of adding online buyers simultaneously with buyers right there in person at events, and you can kind of have a hybrid buyer's audience, if you will, and it adds to a lot of potential, and it really does help the overall appeal, for anybody trying to sell either equipment or land or what have you right now. It really does help find some true market discovery that way. So it's pretty cool that you can do that. And I would imagine that you have a website you can direct people to where you can explain all that and how that all works nowadays, because it's not the way your granddad's auctioneer used to work.
Very true. And Marlin, I think this is a great time to put a plug in for the Nebraska Auctioneers Association. I'm actually about to finish up my term on the board of directors. Their convention is quick approaching here at the end of April, but it's something there we as the board continue to discuss. But auctions are still one of the best ways to have true price discovery and really bring in top quality assets to a top quality market and finding where the true price and value of those assets sit overall. But as when you look to the auctions, I know a lot of folks are always wondering, well, if they say online bidding, can we truly trust? But transparency in our industry is key in truly building confidence in both for the buyers and for the sellers. I think that's where we really can continue to show We can show you how many people were online, where they were bidding from. We can show where the bids were coming in. So especially in our company, transparency is key to a successful auction. And we're happy to work with folks and really bring the best that we can about when it comes to that type of information about a land auction. Will be online.
So what's your web address for Marshall Land Brokers?
Exactly. Go check out all of those land listings, auctions. Don't forget about the equipment side as well. It's simple, marshallauction.com. Again, that's marshallauction.com. You'll see the beautiful orange banner when you see there, top land for sale. We've got a beautiful picture of some corn and a pivot. So go in there, check it out. You can check out sold properties as well. If you kind of want to know where the market is, what we've sold so far in 2024, you can go there and you can see it all again at marshallauction.com.
Well, I know you guys have been busy all year already, and best of luck for the rest of 2024. Let's see how things pan out. Hopefully the weather holds up and everybody has a good year. Clay, great to talk with you again. I appreciate that very much. Clay Patton of Marshall Land Brokers and Auctioneers. Clay is located in Lexington, Nebraska. Well, I appreciate you joining us. For producer Brianne Hendrickson, I'm Marlin Boland. We'll catch you next time on the Comstock channel. Thanks for joining us on our Comstock YouTube channel. Don't forget you can also find us on Facebook and TikTok as well. Futures trading involves risk. The risk of loss in trading futures and or options is substantial, and each investor and or trader must consider whether this is a suitable investment. Past performance is not indicative of future results.